challenges and opportunities, entry points, no, in advancing women's human rights. We are very privileged to have two resource persons. Each of them will speak for maybe about 25 minutes, and then we will have time to have our discussion and open forum. So what I will do, I will introduce both of them and request them to speak one after the other, and then we can have our discussion and open forum. Would that be okay? The first speaker, traveling all the way from Cotabato, is a lawyer, a nurse, an advocate for women's rights. She continued to introduce herself as such, has a long history of advocacy. I first met her when she was giving lectures on gender, women's rights, and Islam, and I learned so many things from her. The next time I met her, she was also the program manager of the Nisa ul Haq fi Bangsamoro Incorporated, and which UN Women was working closely with. Next thing I knew, she was the head of the regional CHR in ARM. And next thing I knew, she was in the office of the governor of ARM as executive secretary. A very busy woman, but she has taken time to join us today. Let us welcome again Attorney Liza Alamia, who will speak on the topic. The second speaker, who was also introduced briefly earlier, also has a very long history. As you know, she was also head of Asia Pacific, opened for my colleagues in the CEDO team. She was in charge of, it was during her watch, and she herself was personally involved in opening some of the UNIFEM offices in the region at that time. She was in the government peace panel, the Philippine government peace panel, negotiating with the MILF from 2001 to 2004. And before that, she was the executive director of the NGO Forum on, in Beijing, the NGO Forum on Women in Beijing in 1995. She has, aside from peace and security, one of her advocacies has been women's participation in public decision making. She has also mentored many women's rights advocates, and is now her new source of excitement is social media. So she's always the woman ahead of her time. So again, welcome again, Ms. Irene M. Santiago, who will speak after Attorney Liza. So, Attorney Liza, thank you again for coming. Take us through, and I'm sure we will learn very much again from you.
Good morning. Maayong buntag sa inyong tanan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very honored to be here and very happy. I made sure that despite the fact that I have a very busy schedule and I'm supposed to be in Cotabato and in Manila also at the same time, but I chose to come here because I knew that I would be meeting again all these powerful women that I've been working with since before. So I try to make my presentation very short. The topic is very, very complicated. It's about conflict, cultural diversity, and plural legal systems in Mindanao, and what are the challenges and opportunities for advancing women's rights. So I'm going to discuss the context in the ARMM, what are the women's human rights issues in the ARM, and what have been the government's responses, as well as the civil society organizations' initiatives with respect to these women's rights, human rights issues, and then some challenges. Okay, so the armed context, we all know, so that I can see a lot of Moro women here. If you look at the history of the ARMM, of Muslim Mindanao, or of Muslims themselves in the Philippines, during the pre-colonial period, the Moros were sovereign in two areas. So there was the sultanates in Sulu and Maguindanao, and the Patapangampong, which is found in the areas of Lanao, among the Maranao group. And there were political structures at that time. And then the colonization by the Spaniards in the 16th century happened. So the Spaniards colonized us for more than 300 years. Now, what was the start of the armed conflict in Mindanao? It started way back, but we will not go back and discuss the conflicts that have occurred during the time of the conquistadores and the Indios and the Moros. But let's look at the recent past on the reassertion of the right to self-determination. Now, it started, this Moro call and struggle for independence began when the Jabida massacre occurred. So if many of you know, there was in 1968 a group of Moro men, most of them were Tausugs, very similar to the ones who invaded Sabah recently, and which gave us a problem at the Regional Human Rights Commission, and much the same kind of people who invaded Zamboanga City, who went to Zamboanga City. I'm from Zamboanga, born in Zamboanga, and I have both Tausug and Yakan blood, as well as Visayan blood. So, kahibalo kong magbinisaya. So, Jabida massacre occurred because of the delusion of one man to invade Sabah, to get Sabah by force. Delusion. Okay. Usually, the whole country, we have been held hostage by the delusions of men. Usually men, di ba? Well, but there was a woman also, but mostly men. Mostly men. So Marcos wanted to invade Sabah, but he called off. For some reason, the Operation Merdeka was called off. And those who were trained to invade Sabah, these Tausug guys, were massacred. They were killed. Unfortunately, for this president, there was one who survived. He already passed away, recently lang din, and he was able to tell his story. And this gave birth to the Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF. So sometime in the 1970s, early 1970s. So the Philippines was placed under martial law during the 1970s, and MNLF was still together with the MILF. There was no MILF, Moro Islamic Liberation Front, yet at that time. There was only one organization, Nur Miswari, together with Hashim Salamat. Later on, there was an agreement between the government and Nur Miswari and the MNLF, 1996. So there was a final peace agreement, FPA, which gave birth to the establishment of the ARMM. But the MILF, Hashim Salamat and his men, which later became the MILF, they were not satisfied with this kind of arrangement, the autonomy that was provided. So there were all-out wars against the MILF in the ensuing years. So 2000, 2001, until by 2008, there was a peace process between the government and the MILF, but by 2008, it bogged down. So there was a document called the MOA-AD, Memorandum of Agreement on the Ancestral Domain, that was initialed but not signed. Okay? It was TRO'd in the Supreme Court. At that time, there were Moro lawyers who filed an intervention in the Supreme Court. And two of them were Attorney Rice of the jury and myself. And then there's another group, the Muslim Legal Aid Foundation. We handled the case for Bangsamoro Lawyers Network, defending the MOA-AD. Of course, we lost. So we lost the case. And then later on, while the MILF GPH peace process has been going on, then we have the Umbracato group skirmishes. So the government, for some reason, the PNP, for example, they wouldn't want to call them the BIFF. So it's very confusing. You have the BIFF, you have the BIAF. They said, on the one hand, there's one school of thought that says that if you're going to call them BIFF, you're giving legitimacy to what they're doing. They're making them into a group, an armed group, a non-state actor. And so they don't want them to they don't want to call them the BIFF. So the Umbra Kato group. So this started last year, 2012, and until now, even as we speak, there are minor skirmishes in some areas, in some municipalities in Mindanao and in North Cotabato, like Pikit. Now, and the latest is this one, the MNLF flag raising activity in Zamboanga. So again, because somebody has declared independence and declared that the Bangsamoro Republic is now independent from the Philippine government, they wanted to raise the flag. They should have come to Davao City because your mayor was okay with the raising of the flag here. But they chose to go to Zamboanga. The Zamboanga City flag raising activity, I'd like to call it a flag raising activity, is some kind of like a jolt. It was a jolt to the Zamboangueños. Because for so long, I come from Zamboanga, we've always felt that Zamboanga is, it's the fourth pillar is there, it's a fortress, and then people believe that Zamboanga would never be attacked. It is not possible for Zamboanga City to be attacked. The PNP, the West Mincom is there, the whole southern Mindanao command is there. But still, Zamboanga City was attacked. So the MNLF went there. Attorney Fontanilla, who's the lawyer for Nur Miswari, has said that they went there peacefully. They went there to have a peaceful rally and to raise the flag. But I come from one of the barangays that were burned in Zamboanga. My house has not been burned, but it is full of holes, this caliber 50 holes. Okay, so we need to repair the house and many of the houses there. But many houses, more than 10,000 houses, buildings, properties have been burned and destroyed. More than 100,000 internally displaced persons. 4 weeks after, there was a flood, and so they were again doubly displaced. From the evacuation centers, they were displaced. 80 to 90% of those who were displaced in the ground zero, the barangays affected by the MNLF flag raising activity, are Moro communities. So 80 to 90% are Moro communities. So did they go there peacefully? Well, at least based on what I know, my personal knowledge, when they went to my barangay in Talon-Talon, I did not find any policemen there. No military was there. When there were policemen. Like our compound is full of policemen. All my relatives and uncles and cousins are policemen. But they did not go out and use their police uniform. Surely they will be killed. So they went out as civilians and looked at what happened. And the MNLF came and they started shooting people in Barangay Talon-Talon. So what happened in Rio Hondo, in Mariki, was a different case. I don't have any personal knowledge on that. They said that they were attacked. They were the ones who were attacked. But in Talon-Talon, definitely, they started shooting people. More Muslims and Christians. So it didn't matter. So some of those who died were my neighbors. Some of those who were taken hostage were my neighbors. My nephews were about to be taken hostage also when they were coming out of the compound because they went there, they arrived in Talon-Talon at around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. That was the time that students are going out of their homes, waiting at the highway for the jeepney to go to school. So there were many students who were kidnapped, okay, so who were hostage and used as human shields. Okay. And many of them were women. So were there peace negotiations that have been conducted? With this kind of situation, there's a lot of conflict. Yes, peace negotiations since the 1970s between the government and the MNLF. There was the 1976 Tripoli Agreement that Nur Miswari is saying now has not been implemented. There's the 1996 Final Peace Agreement that provided autonomy, creation of the ZOPAD, the SPCPD, Consultative Assembly, and eventually the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao under RA 9054, which is an amendment of RT 6734. until now, there are issues in the implementation of RA 9054. Now that I'm working in the ARMM as Executive Secretary and looking at the operations of the ARM, I tell you that really many of the provisions in RA 9054 have not been implemented. The devolution process from national government to the ARMM and providing autonomy to the ARMM has not been completed. We have a problem on that. You can see the budget that's provided for ARM as an autonomous region. There's no program funds. There are no development funds. There are only funds for salaries, for MOE, and a little bit of capital outlay. While a lot of money has been poured into the ARMM coming from development funding institutions, but we're not really sure. And a lot of money came directly from the national government. We can see that now, the issue on TISP, DAP, the pork barrel fund, yes. Has a lot of money got into ARM? Yes. But has a lot of money that would provide development, that would allow the ARM government to implement development programs being provided to ARM? No. No program funds. They came directly from the national government and implemented by agencies outside the ARMM, but for the benefit of the ARMM. So there are some issues there. Okay. 15 years of negotiations between government and MILF. There were signed agreements on both sides, and there were mechanisms created to support the peace process. There's an international monitoring team, a local monitoring team, CPC. Some of you are part of the CPC, the Civilian Protection Component, and many women are part of these NGOs, civil society organizations that work on the peace process. The BDA, Bangsamoro Development Agency, is the super agency that will be doing its work by 2015, 2016, when the Bangsamoro new political entity will come into place. So they will be more than NEDA, more than MINDA. They will do planning, and at the same time, they will be implementing programs and projects. We're already doing coordination with them. Okay, so this one I already discussed. Now, what's the latest? The anniversary of the signing of the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro, which was last October 15, 2012, last year. So during the celebration of the Eid al-Hajj, the day of the feast of the sacrifice, that was also the anniversary of the signing of the framework agreement. And that was, I think, 2 days or 3 days after the latest peace talk in KL. So they umuwi silang luhaan. There is no annex that has been agreed upon, other than the annex on wealth sharing. But there are some gains. There are some gains, but still we're going really slow. The clock is ticking. 2015 is supposed to be the plebiscite. Before we can go to the plebiscite, we need to draft the law, Bangsamoro Basic Law, bring it to Congress, lobby before Congress and before the senators, where they're also besetted with problems on the pork barrel fund and all of these issues. So it's going to be a tough hurdle. So 2015 is supposed to be plebiscite. By 2015, the Bangsamoro Transition Authority is supposed to come in and take over ARM. Okay, so we're supposed to turn over to them the ARMM. That's what we're trying to do now, trying to do some reforms, institutionalize mechanisms so that by the time that we turn this over to the Bangsamoro, the ARM will not be really that failed experiment. So we're trying to do all of these things now between now and 2015. Okay. So what's the situation in the ARMM? This has been the situation. You see a lot of displacement. If you look at statistics, for example, the Regional Human Rights Commission under the protection cluster of the UN has been monitoring displacement since last year. Beginning last year until now, in 1 year period, around 600 to 700,000 internally displaced persons. Why are they displaced? Because of conflict between government and some non-state actors and forces, because of conflict between and among clans, because of political violence. 50% of the 600 to 700,000 IDPs in a 1 year period are actually because of RIDO, the clan wars, political violence. We just had a recent political violence 4 days ago in Talitay, Maguindanao, where three lalays, 3 men of the mayor were ambushed. And so they avenged the death of the 3. And this caused a skirmish between one brigade of the MILF and another brigade of the MILF. Okay? Because they're all related. It's like that. It's usually like that. And so the MILF, together with the GPH, the military, they sent another brigade, a bigger brigade of the MILF to try to settle the dispute. So right now, as we speak, MILF men from another brigade are acting as peacekeepers in Talitay, Maguindanao, to settle the problem, the conflict between 2 forces na nag-aagawan kung sinong magiging mayor by 2016. So political violence, the peace process is being held hostage by this. And most of the IDPs are women and children. This is another picture. This is a picture of the IDPs after the 2008, during the 2008 MOA-AD conflict in Maguindanao. These pictures are more recent. This is as a result of a conflict between military, the army, and the BIFF somewhere at the end, the GSKP, General Sultan, SK Pendatun, yes, GSKP. Okay. Now this one, does this look familiar? Okay. This is in Zamboanga. This is our neighboring barangay. It's no longer a barangay. Okay? The buildings, the houses have been burned, they have been destroyed. This one also. Okay? This is a child at the Joaquin Memorial Enriquez Sports Complex. These are children. IDPs overall are more than 100,000. At Grandstand itself, around 66,000 plus internally displaced persons. More than half of that are women. This is the 10th city along Kawa-Kawa Boulevard, and these are the Bajaus, okay, IPs in Zamboanga. So they're provided with tents, but when the storm came, nabasa rin sila. Okay, so these are the Bajaus along Kawa-Kawa Boulevard. So what are the challenges in the arms? So many challenges. We have fragile communities that are conflict affected, disaster prone, they're remote, and they're marginalized. They're unable to access basic state support that are necessary for adequate standard of living. So why has this happened? You know, the problem on access to education, health services, livelihood programs, and justice. Why do we say that there's a problem on access? If you look at the human development indices, maternal mortality rate, infant mortality rate, if you look at the poverty incidence rate, they're very, very dismal. In the entire country, we have the highest poverty incidence rate, despite the billions of money that have been poured into ARMM. There's militarization involving state and non-state actors, and there's lack or weak rule of law. So even if there is a law, even if the 5 pillars of the criminal justice system are there, you have law enforcers who refuse or hesitant to enforce the law because they would be affected, their families would be affected. You have a DOJ. Yesterday I was just in a meeting and people were complaining that drug cases are just thrown out when they're lodged at the fiscal's office. And then you have a court. You have the court system, of course, the regular court, which do not have cases, not much cases, not so many cases in the ARMM. So if you're a lawyer, a practicing lawyer, it's not lucrative to be practicing in the ARMM. So not so many cases in the court. So there's a problem on accountability, corruption, feudalism. There are political dynasties across the country, but yes, there are political dynasties in the ARMM, and private armies. Okay? So if you are a mayor, if you're a governor, or even a barangay captain, you should have some kind of an army behind you. Even if kahit mga 10 lang, 10 of them, that's enough with high-powered firearms. Lack of or weak justice mechanism. There are cases of human rights issues, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, torture, unlawful arrest. The latest unlawful or illegal arrests were made in the Zamboanga City siege. Zamboanga is not part of ARM, but many of those who were affected come from ARMM. And the ones who invaded Zamboanga are from the ARMM. And then, to top it all, there's a lack of baseline data on the whole human rights situation, including women's human rights. Okay, now, when it comes to women, we have a problem on the following. There's human trafficking. There's a connection between conflict and human trafficking. When you have conflict, when there's chaos, where there's no rule of law, all the opportunists would get into that situation. From politicians who would become mayors or barangay captains or governors to syndicates who would prey on the poor. Okay? Some of them would even pay to be able to go to Zamboanga, then Tawi-Tawi, then Sabah, Malaysia, only to learn later on that they are being trafficked. There's gender-based violence. There are child brides. So NISA Ulhakfi Bangsamoro has conducted a study, and it is still happening in the whole of ARMM, where there's a lot of early marriage. There's prevalence of early marriage, as early as 12 years old, 11 years old, whom we met in one evacuation center. She was 11 when she got pregnant. When we met her, they were still at the evacuation center. She was already 12. She was on her second pregnancy at 12. At 12. Okay? So there are emerging gender issues. You have conflict, there's displacement, you have protracted displacement. Within the evacuation centers, there are emerging gender issues. Like what you've heard about what's happening in Zamboanga at the grandstand. On the 4th or 5th day, there was somebody, a girl who was raped. And then there were girls and boys also were used. They're being paid 10 pesos for one blowjob. Sorry. For one blowjob. And so you will find a lot of NGO, CSOs, and government agencies right now looking into the situation of the women and the girls affected by the conflict in Zamboanga City. Then there are grave child rights violations. Are there child soldiers? Obviously. In just the MNLF siege in Zamboanga, 6 of them, 6 ano? 7 now. 7 of them have been arrested. And are alleged to be MNLF, they're children below 18 years old. And, well, somehow, because of lack of knowledge or because of what has happened in Zamboanga, the military, the PNP, even government, city government officials treat them like criminals. They place them together with the others who were arrested instead of placing them at the CICL center. And even in the CICL center, they're not allowed to get out. They're supposed to be locked. That's violating UN standards for child soldiers. The MNLF is guilty of violating UN standards when it comes to children by having child soldiers. But at the same time, the government also is neglecting its duty. That's something that the Regional Human Rights Commission of ARM has been documenting in Zamboanga. Then we have the formal and informal laws. Formal laws, I'm talking about the Code of Muslim Personal Laws, PD 1083, which applies in the whole country but only for Muslims. So NISA, together with other NGOs and government agencies in the ARM, have been conducting constituency building for the amendment of the Code of Muslim Personal Laws. There are provisions there that are discriminatory, and one of them is the age of marriage. The CMPL allows child brides. It allows betrothal marriage. And so it coincides with the cultural practice of having proxy marriages, weddings, where you're not in your wedding. You're being married off to someone, but you're not there. Plus, you're a child, or you're betrothed. So the betrothal can happen even if you are a baby, under the law, in the provision at the Code of Muslim Personal Laws. And then you have the informal laws, of course, the cultural practices, the norms that are being practiced in these areas. And then you have the dismal women indices on reproductive health, education, and poverty incidents. So what have we done so far for so long? For one, we're supposed to have a Regional Human Rights Commission in the ARM. It's under RA 9054. But this has never been implemented from the time of Nur Miswari until last year, in the middle of the year, when we started setting up all the mechanisms to be able to set up the Regional Human Rights Commission. Officially, by February of 2013, the RHRC arm has been established. I was appointed as chair, but I resigned later by July. I was held hostage by the situation in the ARMM, so I felt I'm needed in the ARMM, and the RHRC is in good hands. Many of them, some of them are here, are head of the Lanao del Sur office, the Zamboanga City Basulta office, and of course, Executive Director, si Attorney Toy Mitmug. So that's one. So the RHRC has been established that's supposed to look also into issues of women's human rights. And then we have the Regional Commission for Bangsamoro Women, the RCBW, which for so many years, when I'm still with NISA, I've worked with the PCW, trying to strengthen the RCBW and capacitate them and all of that, but we've been having problems. So now that we're now within the ARMM and we put some women who would really work, I'm looking forward to revitalizing the RCBW and the RCBW working with the PCW. It's supposed to be doing a PCW job within the ARMM, but they have not done this before. But despite that, we know that we have passed, ARM has passed the GAD code, the Gender and Development Code. This was also through the technical assistance that was provided, technical and legal assistance that was provided by NISA Ulhak v. Bangsamoro. There's an ARM Regional GAD Code, there's a Sulu Provincial GAD Code, and based on the Sulu Provincial GAD Code, there's supposed to be a Sulu Women Crisis Center, and at that time, today, right now, this has been established already. So the provisions in the Sulu Provincial GAD Code is now being implemented. So there's a very nice, very beautiful women's center in Holo, Sulu. The governor at that time, because what we did was we did some back channeling. To reach the governor, we talked to the wife, the first lady. And the first lady is very, very active on women organizations, on implementing the GAD code. So when we were there. And because of that, the governor could not do anything, Governor Sakurtan. So he gave a budget to jumpstart the implementation, plus he had a building constructed. So CSO women are the one managing the Women's Center together with DSWD Sulu. So they have had a lot of clients already, victims of violence against women, trafficking survivors that have been rescued, because some of the trafficking victims would go to Sulu before going to Tawi-Tawi. Okay, so it's now working. They just need more capacity building. So what's the Armed God Code? Actually, at the time that we were drafting this, the Magna Carta of Women was passed, recently passed, and the IRR was being done. So I was working with PCW at that time. And it's actually a localization of the Magna Carta of Women. Many of the provisions of the Armed God Code are actually similar to the provisions of the Magna Carta of Women. It's also a localization of UNSCR 1325 and NAP 1325, because the whole of ARM is a conflict-affected area. And so the UNSCR 1325 provisions apply at ARMM. All the 5 provinces are conflict-affected areas, and you would find provisions in the Armed God Code with respect to women affected by conflict, women who are in especially difficult circumstances. And then, at the time that the RH bill was being debated bloodily, violently at Congress, we were able to have the Armed Reproductive Health Code, the RH Code, the RH law in the ARMM passed. Okay? The challenge now is to implement this. There's already an IRR. The Armed God Code also has an IRR now. So we're now down to implementation. So OPAP, OPAP has been able to provide funds for the RCBW for the construction, for the setting up of women crisis centers. So one at the regional level and one each at the 5 provinces. Kasi sa Sulu, meron na eh. Marawi City also has a God code, but the Lanao del Sur province does not have a God code. Okay? The other provinces, they have the draft God codes. We turned that over to them already. NISA has turned that over to them in 2010. And they're supposed, the Sanggunians are supposed to pass them. So, any latest?
The province of Lanao del Sur is claiming that they have passed the God code.
But we cannot find it. Yes. So, there's a need to have another God code. So, we'll make sure that the RCBW will work on that. And then, capacity building. Capacity building that was conducted by both government, national civil society organizations, and local CSOs in the ARMM on gender in Islam, CEDAW, international and national legal frameworks, monitoring, mobilizing, organizing. And then other NGOs have been working on poor women's economic empowerment. So NISA has been working with Oxfam and other NGOs like PKKK and all the NGOs under this coalition that work on rural women, farming women, the farmers and fisher women, fisher folks, all the rural women. Meron din tayong na-set up in the ARMM, the Armed Council Against Trafficking. This is a new one. So in all the other regions, there's a regional anti-trafficking, a RIACAT, but not in the ARMM. So this was established only this year, last last January. So we're going to have the first workshop this year by end of October and implement. Our target is to set up a one-stop shop processing center in Tawi-Tawi, Bongao, similar to the one that's found in Zamboanga City, that processes all deportees and evacuees coming from Sabah and looks at the situation of the victims of trafficking. So it's a one-stop shop processing center, a crisis centers. And then the amendment of the Code of Muslim Personal Laws. We're done with the initial constituency building. NISA has already done that. What we're doing now is drafting the provisions, the amended provisions, so that this will be taken. We already have champions in Congress. There are 2 representatives in Congress who would like to author the amended Code of Muslim Personal Laws, and there's 1 senator who would like to also author this at the Senate level. So dalawa. So we will have the bill passed at both the lower house and the upper house, and then i-consolidate na lang nila later. So that's between now and 20 years after, no? Looking at the RH bill, it has taken how many years? So really, it's very difficult because we need to build constituencies not only among the Moros, the Muslims, but among everyone, including mainstream Filipinos, so that your congressmen, your representatives in Congress would vote for it and say that, yes, let's pass this because this will help our Muslim women. And then the issue on displacement and women's rights, the one that I was talking about. There's conflict, there's natural disaster, there's displacement, and then you have emerging gender issues. But there has been we have not encountered a case of rape as a means of war, as a weapon of war. Hopefully, inshallah, it will not happen here. I don't think it applies in the culture of the Filipino, whether Moro, IP, or a settler, lumad here in Mindanao or in other parts of the country. So wala pa naman na ganon. But there are a lot of cases of gender-based violence, mainly because of all the reasons that I have said. You put all of those factors, including a weak or lack of rule of law and a weak governance in the area, and you have gender-based violence cases. So the ARMM has used the cluster approach. We've divided the cabinet into 5 clusters. There's 1 cluster that looks at the situation of women, the HEART. Okay, the HEART means Humanitarian Emergency Action Response Team. It looks at preparedness and rapid response to cases of displacement as a result of natural disaster and conflict, and in doing so, would be able to look at women's human rights issues. The RHRC is part of HEART. RHRC is also part of the second cluster, which is on justice, human rights, security, and transition to the Bangsamoro. So RCBW is the main agency in that cluster when it comes to women. And on women, peace, and security, many women are part of the MLF GPH peace process. So these are just some of the pictures. We know that aside from Inday Santiago, Ma'am Inday Santiago, Dr. Grace Rebollos, also from Zamboanga, the women right now within the GPH MLF peace process, they're at the negotiating table. They're also at the Bangsamoro Transition Commission. I don't have a picture of Froylin. Yeah, Froylin from the IP group, the Duray group, who's part of the Bangsamoro Transition Commission. So how many women are at the Bangsamoro Transition Commission? We have Attorney Raisa de Jury, Attorney Johaira Wahab, Froylin Mendoza, and Fatmawati Salapudin. Okay? So Yasmin Lau is at the GPH